In our last video, we talked about how important it was to bring healing into the home, to literally be able to show up as different, as a mom, as a dad, really the way God meant you to be in the home. And then what a difference showing up that way makes. It's incredible. And so in this video, we're going to talk about how parents can build legacy and what that looks like for their kids.
Yes, and we wanted to share a story to illustrate legacy and just how God is in the details, how he actually loves to be in the details and working behind the scenes. So when Dan and I were dating, actually it was like right before we started dating.
And we weren't even dating.
Yeah, we weren't. And I gave you a book, and that book was called Return of the Prodigal Son.
Yeah, by Henri Nouwen.
Yes, and it's a powerful book. I highly recommend it. But it was speaking to that healing of a father and a son and the relationship there. I mean, there's so much there. So for Christmas that year, I got Dan a painting of that. I had it framed and gave him that painting. And that would prove to be something that God would work in the details later, which is so cool. And it led him to really what we wanted to share about was Dan's relationship with his own dad, with his dad that adopted him and took care of him.
Yeah, because this book, it really began the healing process for my dad and I. And that book really inspired me to reconcile with my dad. I mentioned earlier in a previous video that my mom had a cardiac arrest. It left her brain damaged. My dad and I were taking care of her for 13 years. And my dad had an enormous amount of pain to deal with. I wasn't aware of at the time because my dad didn't talk about it, but he grew up in a family with 9 other kids. Both his dad and stepdad were violent, abusive drunks. And he's growing up age 5 in the middle of the Depression, contributing and helping his family survive. That's my dad's upbringing. And so my dad, he's there and he's taking care of my mom to his great credit, but he's also frustrated. It's also hard. And he took that out on me, and that became really hard for me. And so there was a lot of verbal and physical abuse, and growing up, it was really difficult with my dad. Now fast forward through a lot of details that I'm not getting into, but you fast forward to this book, and I'm reading this book, and it showed me that reconciliation was possible, and it was something that I really wanted, and my dad and I were able to reconcile. So we had 20 years of a reconciled relationship until I started talking to my dad, and I noticed things were a little bit off. And at first it just seemed like something, well, my dad's getting older and that's what it is. But eventually it came to be, it was dementia. My dad had dementia, and I went on 3 different occasions to get him out there, and I finally did. I'm getting out there. We're bringing him back. We got him home. He stayed with us here for a month, and then we got him into a memory care facility, just literally right down the road from our house. I could walk there from my house, and so I saw my dad just about every single day, and it was such an amazing experience for me. It was so healing.
Yeah, we had him for a year, almost to the day, literally to the day. And he lived so really close by. And a lot of times sometimes when people get a dementia, they can tend to be a little bit difficult or angry, but it seemed to have the opposite effect on Dan's dad. And he became so loving. And it was the best thing that happened in his day was when Dan walked in. And he had this year of his dad. Whenever he would see him, he would light up, and the people there would tell him, your dad just talks about you. And that was not the relationship that they had. And there was a lot of healing that you had done on your side. But it was really such a gift that he had that last year with his dad, and that we were able to take care of him in that way.
Yeah.
But then there was this very special day that happened on Father's Day that we had here with him.
And that was really neat, because I wrote my dad a letter on Father's Day, and I wrote it to him purposely because he had dementia. I wanted him to be able to read it and reread it and reread it. And in this letter, I just told my dad everything I admired about him, all the things that I respected about him, all the things, I just acknowledged all the things in his life that he had endured and overcome and fought through and gotten to the other side of and took care of, and the amount of integrity and strength that he had. And I just laid it all out in this letter, everything that I appreciated about him as a man. And my dad, I've seen cry twice in my entire life. Once was when my mom died in our arms, and the second time was after he finished reading this letter.
Yeah.
And the only thing he could choke out was, my whole life has been worth it.
Yeah.
And it was such an amazing experience for me to just really have that healing and that bond. And for my dad, even a guy who made all the mistakes that my dad did, who didn't have the benefit of anybody helping him out at all, he was able to look back at his legacy as a parent and say what we all want to say as parents, that our whole life has been worth it and what we've poured into our kids.
Yeah, very, very powerful. And it's so amazing because Dan had the opportunity to go to Russia to speak. He was invited to go and speak. And it was at this time when we knew his dad had gone into the hospital, and we knew that he wasn't going to make it much longer, but we didn't know. So he couldn't commit. He could not say yes to this trip, which was a trip of a lifetime. So after his dad passed, it turned out that it was 2 weeks before this trip. And so he was able to get on the flight, same flight with the other guy that had invited him to go. And so here he was standing.
Yeah.
Where?
So I'm speaking at this conference with my friend, Christian, and that book that I mentioned, The Return of the Prodigal Son, well, it was, like I said, it was a transformational book for me. God really used that book to bring a lot of healing into my life.
And that picture is in our living room.
Even. But I remember saying to myself, I'm reading this book, I'm looking at Rembrandt's picture of the prodigal son, and I had a thought to myself all these years ago, man, that's amazing, but like I'm never gonna get to Russia and see it. And then all these years later, because God pays attention to the details, I'm standing in front of this painting. It's huge, and I'm looking up at it, and I'm taking it in, and I'm just weeping with gratitude. I could not stop the tears from flowing. I was so grateful. I was just so encouraged. I was so fathered in that moment, and it was it was powerful. And again, because God pays attention to the details, and he wants our healing to be complete and to the core. And so in that legacy, I had a Father's Day, brought the card that my daughter made for me. Happy Father's Day. Every time I read a card, I want to say something different, not arbitrary. I couldn't ask for a better dad. I've realized no amount of time of me saying that to you would be enough. You're the best dad, and one of my best friends, my teacher, my therapist, all in one. So I couldn't have asked for a better dad, because no one could do what you do and continue to do for me. Your unconditional love is more than I could ask for or deserve. So thanks for being my dad and doing it so well. Love, Landry. I know I can say the same thing my dad did, which is my whole life has been worth it.
Beautiful story. And God's story is always redemption. And there's always hope. There's always healing. It's never too late, and it's never too soon to start. So God's story is always about redemption. And no matter where you are in your story, redemption is possible. It is never too late, and it is never too soon to heal. And that's what we are all about at Preparing Kids for Life. And another layer of the prodigal son story is actually that is the foundation for our main curriculum of Family Builders. We have this process of self-parenting that we do that is incredibly healing. All of it is foundational with learning with the grief recovery principles, learning emotional health and safety, and how you can heal yourself and your wounds so that you can be present for your own kids. And everything that we do at Preparing Kids for Life is about just that redemption and that healing. So we'd love to welcome you in and hope that you'll join us in your journey. And we can't wait to hear your story.